Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode with AA Media. Today I have the pleasure to have with me Joey Bykov, one of my good friends, one with that I've had a lot of deep conversation, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Well, first and foremost, Alvi, it's an absolute pleasure to be on here. And when Alvi sent me the message saying you want to hop on the podcast, I was quick to respond yes, because I've listened to some of the past episodes that you've had and some of the clips and found the conversations to be quite insightful. So thank you for giving me the space to have space to speak, which is awesome. And yeah, as for me, I'm a student at Vanderbilt University, obviously. Have quite a bit of interest in the world of personal development and business, and that's really two of my biggest passions, hobbies, talking points. So happy to dive into really wherever you want to start.
Joey, I want to tell you that you have one of the biggest array of skill set that I've met in my life. You go do content creation, short format. You've gotten into the podcasting area. You're also an entrepreneur doing a lot of other businesses in the form of the agency.
Yep.
Where do you want to start? Which one is your favorite? How did this progress happen from you since, like, I assume high school and college? And yeah, let me know what is your favorite thing to do and where do you want to start in terms of like entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I'll give you a little bit of background because I think a storyline kind of gives a lot more clarity. So I think when you're a kid, you gain a lot of clarity and your real, true, authentic self shows. In the context of, have you ever watched videos of yourself when you were younger?
Yeah.
For me, when I watched videos of myself when I was younger, it was my brother and I dancing around saying, my name's Asher, my name's Joey, and welcome to our web show. So like, this was when we were 5 and basically 7 years old, and we didn't know much at the time, but we loved creating things. Fast forward a little bit, I took my interest in basically creating to high school, where I did a lot of speech and debate and sort of crafted my oratory ability. And I tend to think that I'm quite oratorially strong.
I can confirm that.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that. And I think that stems from the fact that when I was younger, I was basically like illiterate. I basically like an undiagnosed learning disability, wasn't able to read quite well. And so as a byproduct of that, I listened quite a bit and I spoke quite a bit. And so I think that was really the catalyst to my interest in speaking. So down the line, obviously went to high school, speech and debate, had the opportunity to talk with a bunch of like-minded kids about diverse topics like universal basic income, nuclear proliferation. I was like, whoa, my brain is exploding. This is crazy. I love the ideas of having, thoughtful conversations with people that think that these issues matter, which was really cool. A little bit of timeline goes by, and I end up realizing that what I once got from a high school activity was not as nourishing to me, given the context. I think that information is useless unless it's transferred. And I didn't feel as though the information that was getting transferred at that time was expanding to a global perspective. It was left on the debate stage, not necessarily the world stage. And so when I think it was 2018, back in the day when podcasting was not as big of a thing, I ended up starting a podcast called Depolarized with the main goal of basically building a generational toolkit to heal a divided world. I figured the world was super divided. I want to have a conversation with people in my local community and maybe bigger, who knows, all stemming from my parents' basement. So with an iPhone, some duct tape, a little bit of ambition, started a podcast, not really knowing where it would go. A few years down the line, expanded past, the confines of my parents' basement and had some really cool conversations with, world changers in their own regard, from master level marketers to nonprofit founders, Fortune 500 executives. And so I think, the podcasting ecosystem really gave me an understanding into what happens when people collaborate. And it also gave me insight into the inklings of what my interest would later be, which is business. I did not really make it like a business-centric podcast. It wasn't something that I wanted to monetize, but through the research and process of seeing, hey, podcasting is actually something that's really cool. Oh, look, Joe Rogan just did a few $100 million deal here.
Might as well.
Yeah, might as well. I ended up realizing, like, wow, media is really cool. Entrepreneurship is really cool. This is really where I want like my future to be. I'm fascinated by it. I think the idea of business is something that can allow for collective synergies to be built, to build something way greater than ourselves. And of course, everybody can have their own disparate perspectives as to, for-profit, nonprofit. I just think that business, stemming from my interest in podcasting and looking into the media world, really catalyzed my interest in business now. So ended up having the opportunity to work with a handful of companies on basically like helping companies scale their growth from a handful of like startups and the likes, and ended up basically building out an agency to do the same, just at scale with a handful of people. And I've been really fortunate to be on this journey. Of course, it's super inkling and super small at this point, but I think it's a step in the right direction, given that it hybridizes my interest in creativity, things like this, videos, conversations, analytical problem solving, and also team building. So that's a little bit about me as to how I came to be. I don't know if that covers everything.
That was a great summary. I mean, I'm impressed the way that you can bounce from one topic to the other one. And you mentioned that you struggled with articulating or putting words to your thoughts as a kid. So I kind of want to explore that area. Okay. How does Joey Bykov deal with discomfort?
That's a good question. You know, if I could wait like 5 minutes to give you a real in-depth answer, I would. But for the sake of time, I'll give you what's the first thought on my mind. I think that the only way in which I can really explain this is like when you're young, you feel really confident in what you're saying because your scope of understanding, your surface area of what the world actually means is so remarkably small. But I think as I've grown older and had more experiences and more insight, my scope of the world, the surface area of the world, has literally expanded. So literally my circumference of lack of understanding has reached an all-time high compared to my past self. And so I think I'm in a constant state of, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. But I think being reminded of the fact that, hey, you once were in this similar position and you made it out okay is something that's quite rewarding to me. So in terms of navigating difficulty, navigating uncertainty, is that really the point that you're trying to go for? I think I just rest on the fact that I've been in situations in the past where I've basically just followed my intuition and followed my impulse, and that's led me to a pretty decent conclusions. Like when I was younger, I was really interested in the circus, and I ended up like going to circus camps and like basically becoming like one step before becoming like a professional circus performer. That was me. And I was like, I didn't know what circus performance was at the time, but through my process of following my curiosities and being able to willfully roam, I was able to get to a level of expertise which most people weren't able to get to. And I did that serially with music, with, you know, hopefully now that comes to business as well with podcasting. I think it's just something where once you prove it to yourself once, for me at least, the confidence in navigating uncertainty has been that much stronger.
As a guy who likes to try a lot of new things, I mean, circuit performance is also one of those things. Yep. I'm kind of curious on the growth aspect. Do you think growth happens when you take the initiative to do something that's ambiguous, uncomfortable, very rare? Or do you think growth comes after you have done the discomfort, you have done the ambiguous thing, since you now are familiar with that feeling? Or is it a balance of both?
I think when it comes to growth, growth is perpetual. Like the way in which I view it is, the moment that you stop learning is the day that you start dying.
True that.
And so I would say that it's a hybrid of both, especially in my own life. I think experiential growth is something that's really big for me, as in going into experience, not knowing much, i.e. college. Like, you know, you and I both went into college. We're learning actively while we're here. But as a byproduct too, it's kind of like, you know, when you watch a basketball game, it's like the post-game interview. Like I do that quite a bit. I even have like logs and logs and logs on my phone where I think this is something that I've really tried to get into recently. And this is why I've gotten into the practice of journaling a few years ago, is this idea of, you know, there's experiential learning and then there's basically like post-factum learning that I'm really trying to hone into, because I think that we can learn more post-event, post-whatever experience. And we can take just that much more from our experiences by being able to reflect and digest that. So it's funny that you note that, because, you know, my notes are filled and filled and filled with just, hey, Joey, how would you have navigated this situation differently had you had a different mindset? Let's introspect a little bit more. How are you presenting yourself in this context? Who do you want to be, Joey, ultimately? After like many conversations that are deep, insightful, thoughtful that I have, it's a common practice for me to basically have that documented. So yeah, I would say it's a hybrid of the two for sure.
Yeah. I also want to connect with the point of learning. And I know we both are fascinated by this guy, Alex Hormozi, who went to Vanderbilt and provides a lot of value in terms of how to start and grow a business. I heard him say that what is learning? He defined learning that you have a circumstance now, and then you have the same circumstance later. If your behavior to that circumstance has changed, That's what's learning. So what is intelligence? Then it's the rate of learning. How fast can you start changing your behavior to the circumstances that you've had in the past? He probably explained this much better than I did, but to my understanding, it looks to me that the engagement with new things could also expose you to more learning as well. Do you think it's important to find one thing and hone in and be as knowledgeable about as possible? Or would you say breadth is a more important aspect in terms of pursuing your passion, or in my case, podcasting, or somebody who's trying to get into the field of content creation?
I think this brings up a bigger question, or a bigger point of conversation, which is equally as valuable, which is, breadth or depth is oftentimes the question. And I think with technological evolution that we're facing right now, the ability for us to, say, record this podcast and then some AI technology be able to parse through it, the necessities for technicality is going to reduce to basically a point where machinery is going to be able to maximize basic computations, basically adding captions, whatever it may be. And so I think us as a society, we're reaching this pivot point where we no longer necessarily need to be that person who has maximum depth, which is why something that I really value, and I don't necessarily know if I coined the term, but it's something that I'm trying to subscribe to right now, and it's served me quite well in the past. It's this idea of being a maximized generalist. So what I mean by that is, I like to be the guy that walks into a room and can talk with anybody about anything. And I think that's particularly because I'm just interested in the world of business, and business is not necessarily, an interest. It's a way of being. It's at its core, it's soft skills. Are you able to connect? Like, if I'm able to fundamentally connect with you, then maybe we can build something cool together in the future. You know what I mean? And so for me, my value add in the way in which I've changed my perspective quite rapidly, because in high school, I was very much like a STEM kid. I wanted to go into medicine. And I ended up, still awesome career path. But I ended up realizing more and more that the people who are the maximized generalists, take Richard Branson, for example, serial entrepreneur, Gary Vaynerchuk, serial entrepreneur, Alex Hormozy, serial entrepreneur. I mean, I'm just referencing names that both of us are familiar with. All of these people are able to have just enough insight, just enough knowledge to be potent and lethal in conversation. They don't need to know how to code perfectly. They need to know what exactly a data set is. They need to know exactly certain rhetoric to then be able to communicate it. So for me, the way in which I hope to navigate the world is to have just enough to communicate to get the job done. And the more people that I can communicate with effectively, that's how you build a team. You know what I mean? And initially, I think I was short-sighted in the sense of, I need to be the technical expert. I need to go deep on everything. But, assuming that life is long and you get to live, 80, 90, hopefully, maybe longer with modern technological evolution, even that's not long enough to be a specialist in everything.
Right. So, I love that. And I love the fact that the more you know, as you said previously, the bigger the circle of unawareness becomes. You're noticing things that you don't know. But again, circling back to your current point is that you don't really have to know everything in depth, as long as you know the important, crucial informations that let you bond and connect with the other person who might have that depth, right?
Yep.
And then I think that's like another part where maybe AI could be kind of weak, where it's very good at a lot of things, but not necessarily very good at a very specific things. And this is pointed out by my professor, Dr. Rina, who's teaching me algorithm at a CS class, that yes, AI knows a lot of things, a lot of languages, a lot of programming styles, but when you ask very specific algorithmic questions of the big O of depth first search, it kind of falls short. So I'm wondering, I know you're also knowledgeable of the AI space. Where do you see this thing going? Do you think humans will be the people who have the very specific deep knowledge, or do you think that eventually will be acquired by AI as its development continues?
I mean, I'm just a guy who's an observer, and I think that's I think what any listener should have context is, like, I'm not an AI researcher. I'm in a class that's related to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're students at the end of the day.
I mean, I think there's certain things that, like, no matter how human a machine can act, there's certain things that a human just can't. there's certain things that a machine just can't necessarily emulate with perfect accuracy. For instance, a machine, may not be able to be as like randomly irrational as humans are.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think machines are much more rational than humans could probably ever be. But I think the beauty of humanity is that we're not necessarily rational. We're not necessarily logical. We oftentimes make logical conclusions to basically like make whatever we do seem justified. But, it's when it comes to artificial intelligence, I think, again, and this is the reason why my paradigm has shifted quite a bit, this idea of maximized generalist, there's just certain things in this world that are so valuable despite the economic times, despite the technological evolution. It's the soft skills. No machine is going to be able to bond with me. No machine is going to be able to offer me the love that you or I will feel. No machine is going to be able to, get this level of, human contact. And so I think the reason why I act the way that I do is because I still think that soft skills and the ability to connect wholeheartedly is something that a machine will never be able to fully emulate or fully accurately basically represent, much like a human.
I see. And personally, I would kind of push back on that point because I do think AI will come to that stage where it perfectly measures the way that feelings of humans interact with each other. Maybe it would be difficult and more hard to acquire, but that's just a personal belief. And I want to kind of diverge to a different topic, which is your entrepreneurship drive. I know a lot of times entrepreneurs are tested with failures. And we talked a little bit about discomfort, but as Churchill said, an entrepreneur is somebody who can go from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. How do you preserve that motivation, that, readiness to go and tackle the challenge, even though in the back of the mind, you might be aware that you're going to fail?
Well, okay. I think it's interesting because I think the academic institutions that we've been a part of for like years and years and years have taught us the wrong way of framing failure. Like, you're looked down upon if you raise your hand and you get a question wrong, right? And I think that methodology is the complete opposite of what entrepreneurship or running businesses or the real world is actually like. For me, the moment that I realized that my education isn't necessarily the thing that's going to align perfectly with my interest in business is the moment where I discern the two. And so for me right now, I'm trying to reprogram myself to be able to ask questions or...
Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
Is the audio always messing it?
Okay. I'm trying to reprogram myself to essentially ask questions with the intent of sometimes being wrong. And I think the first step for me is being content in the fact that much like I'm not a machine, I'm not always going to be right, and be content with that. I think the people that are able to succeed remarkably are the ones that are able to be most resilient to failure. And by being most resilient to failure, it means having enough self-love to be able to say, hey, I'm going to do this again because I believe in myself. And so when it comes to navigating failure, I think it really boils down to just that. It's giving yourself enough self-acceptance to say, I might get this wrong, and that's totally okay, Albie. That's totally okay, Joey. This is part of the process. And I think for me, like, I think Tom Bilyeu put it best. It's like, I didn't like this aspect of myself. I was scared shitless, and I built $1 billion company. So it's like, they're not mutually exclusive. I think you can build really cool things while also being deathly afraid of failing and being afraid of messing up, but understanding the fallibility of yourself in the context and understanding that you are a human much like anybody else and you have the propensity to fail. Yet other people have shown that despite failure, you can still get back up. Steve Jobs got kicked out of Apple, man. Yeah. Like, I think for me, something that gives me comfort, especially in a world where I realize like maybe some of the stuff that I'm genuinely interested in, other people aren't interested in, is understanding that somewhere out in the ecosystem and the environment that we live in, whether historically or right now, there's been somebody who's been in the same exact position that you've been in. And that may be, has done crazy things. You know what I mean?
I love that.
Jeff Bezos worked at a company and he was like, I'm really interested in this thing called e-commerce. I don't know, man.
Let's see what's up.
Yeah, let's see what's up. Let's start drop shipping books, or let's start like, I don't know if he drop shipped it, but like, let's start shipping books from like warehouses. And because he took that jump, I think thematically we can see that in a bunch of other entrepreneurs and a bunch of other people, despite business, like in life. I think the more touch points that you can have towards people that have done similar stuff to you almost validates and makes me feel more comfortable in uncomfortable situations. You know what I mean? It's almost like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. The moment that you realize that is when you can actually win.
I love that. And it's also a good point to keep me humbled that, look, you might be whining that your circumstance is terrible, but there's people who already went through that and did well. So it's motivation, and also like, you know, kind of telling me that don't give up. You're going to do great. If somebody else did it, then what is preventing you from doing it? Okay, you labeled it, then now go and fix it and work on it. Yeah. And I know we talked about AI being having the entrepreneurial drive, podcasting a little bit. Sure. As a last question, I'm just curious, what is one skill that you would prioritize right now? What is one skill that you're investing a lot of your time that you think later on will give good returns?
You mean in a business context or in life, or like in what context are you particularly talking about?
I would say personally business, because I think that's where the direction of the podcast is going. As the young entrepreneur who's listening to you right now, what would you say is like one skill that right now is becoming crucial?
Sure. I mean, there's two answers that I have. There's one that's like much more technical, and the answer would probably be sales. The real answer, taking it way more macro, which I think is much more beneficial, is the ability to empathize. I think in business, in life, in whatever, you're going to be met with crossroads every single day. And I know for myself, like all the time, whether it's in business, I think business is oftentimes a reflection of your personal life, and how you navigate your business ecosystem is often how you navigate your personal life as well. And so in moments of conflict, and I've realized this for me, especially given the fact that I've been in conflict in business and I've been in conflict in life, being able to see the other side and then navigate your solution is so remarkably valuable. Because of course we can figure out based on, you know, certain things, you know, what may be right based on a machine. You know, a machine may be able to be a third party that makes my business decision sooner or later. I can ask ChatGPT, what should I do? But there's certain things that just can't do, which is like, what's the real empathy here? And so I think for anybody who wants to service the world, whether it's in entrepreneurship, nonprofit work, building a cool project, being able to stem what you do, not necessarily with greed, but from empathy, and using empathy as the driving factor and keeping that as the through line as you scale, as you grow, as you build relationships, it will never serve you wrong. And so ultimately, I think it's that. On the sales front, I know I'm giving two things, but like on a technical side, you know, you've watched this podcast. Congratulations. You just watched a sales letter. And when you watch this video sales letter, you're going to be compelled to maybe watch another one of Albi's podcasts. And so everything is a sell, right? The moment that I talked to Albi, the reason why we have a friendship is because I sold myself. Albi sold himself to me. And so I think, you know, taking yourself outside of the context of I'm trying to sell some product or service, you're trying to sell yourself all the time. And people buy into other people. They don't necessarily buy into businesses. That's why when, you know, a venture capital firm funds a company, they're like, I expect you to pivot. I expect you to change. I expect you to navigate, but I have confidence in you that you'll make that pivot worthwhile. And so I think being able to hone in and articulate on what you value, what you care about, and how you can articulate that valuably to other people is such a potent skill that will stand the test of time. So that's the more technical side. On the more qualitative side, it's definitely empathy.
I love it. You always give answer with a lot of information, and I love that because it's valuable for the people who are listening to Sales 1, Empathizing 2. Great advice, Joey. It's been a pleasure having you in the podcast. Thanks for all of your knowledge. Thanks for all the information and for the time that you made today. I hope to, again, have this conversation with you in the future.
Absolutely. Stay tuned. Watch the next episode.